Good evening, folks. I've got everybody muted to start out with, which we'll probably leave that way. I see there's a few of us on the line already. We're going to give it till probably a couple minutes after 7 o'clock so that everybody gets a chance to sign in before we get going too much. So if you would leave yourself on mute for now, that would be great. We will have a chance to do some questions at the end.
Hey, Bill, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, awesome.
Yeah, I started out with everybody on mute right now, and we probably will ask everybody to stay on mute until the end, unless you're presenting like Andy will be, and that way we don't get a lot of background noise.
Okay. Okay, go, buddy. Come on. I know.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like I have to actually be admitting people as they pop up here, so I'll have to kind of keep an eye on that screen. So. Okay. It looks like we've got about a dozen of us so far. That's good. There's another one. Okay. A few more minutes. Those of you who are waiting that just recently dialed in, I did start out with everybody on mute, and we'll ask people to keep their mute on unless you're going to be presenting. There will be some opportunity at the end for questions, but just given the format, it'll be a lot easier if we just hold questions to the end. There's another person coming in. Okay, and we are going to be recording the meeting. Hopefully we will have enough storage space to record the whole meeting. And when we have that done, we should be able to download it and post it on the Mount Air website for those that weren't able to make it. Otherwise, I do have a PowerPoint that I'm going to use tonight to kind of keep things orderly. And we'll get that posted out on the Mount Air website as well. Okay, I'm going to probably wait until about 5 after to actually start the meeting. There we go. Give people a chance to get dialed in. Okay, we still have a few people dialing in, so I got about 15 people so far, which is nice. And we'll just give it a couple more minutes. I still see a flurry of people dialing in. And as people are joining, I'll just repeat, I have started out with everybody on mute, and I would just request that everybody stay on mute unless you're presenting. There should be an opportunity for questions at the end. Certainly if there's something that really has to be asked at the time, that's okay, but it would be a little awkward to get too much discussion going, in this format. And as I go through my presentation here, and there will be time to answer questions at the end. And Andy, if your dogs start to bark, I'll tell you to mute.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to give it till just about 5 after, so if you can be patient for a couple more minutes. I just want to give everybody a chance as much as possible to get dialed in. While we're waiting, I am going to try to share my screen. And I want to share this screen. And hopefully you can see, let me get the right thing up here. That's not the screen I wanted to share. Hang on a minute. That one. Okay, I got one more chance to try to get that right. Just bear with me. Well, it seems to, let me just have to try something a little different here real quick.
We can see your screen, Bill.
Okay, now what I'm trying to do is, if you can bear with me a minute, what I'm trying to do is to get the, are you seeing the actual, I think you're seeing the, not seeing the actual version with the, let's see, let me finish admitting people here. Okay. And what I'm fussing with is I'd like you to see the slideshow version rather than my editing version, which would be good. I just have to try to get the right screen shared, I think. Let me try it one more time. And then we're about 5 after, and we'll just go ahead one way or the other here. So just bear with me while I try to get the right screen shared. Okay. Well, I guess that's what we're going to get. So I have one more person to admit here. Okay, I should be able to get going here. Well, first of all, welcome to our rather odd format for a Mount Air Improvement Annual Shareholders Meeting. As I've mentioned a couple of times as people were signing in, I would request that everybody just stay on mute. There'll be a chance to answer questions at the end. Then, if you do have something that just can't wait, go ahead and unmute and ask. But otherwise, it'd be best if we just kind of hold off until the end. It looks like we've got a pretty good number of people here. We got about 18 people on the line here, so that should work out okay. Now, the screen that you're seeing, Andy, can you tell me, is that the actual slideshow presentation or is that the editing screen?
It looks like the real presentation.
Oh, okay. Is it only the slide or do you see other things?
I don't see other. I mean, I just see the joiners on the right side of the screen, but that's about it. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay.
So,
So
yeah.
other than that, it's just the blue slide. Okay. So that was
Yeah.
good. All right. So I am doing fine then. Okay. I'm going to just go ahead and get started then. Just real quickly, your board members are myself as chair of the Mount Air Improvement Shareholders Board, and then Greg Bartlett is a board member, Matt Benjamin, Mike McGaughy, Andrea Blassie, those are your board members. And then Andrei, who is going to talk to us a little bit tonight, is the secretary treasurer. And I'm going to just dive right into the treasurer's report. Andrei, if you can bring us up to date on a few of the key things.
Sure thing, and I'm going to make this as short as possible. Just really quick balances. So in the checking account, we have $12,584.17. In the savings, we have $3,140.77, and I still have $300 to be deposited. I did send a couple of letters to some delinquents, asking them to get back to me within a week. Other than that, we'll have to take further action as we've discussed previously. And also regarding this quarter, the billing for this quarter, since the EPA lifted the restrictions, we're going to go back to the $150 per quarter, unless we are being told otherwise. And I think that's all I have for you.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I put up on the agenda is that we had done a couple of temporary rate reductions, mainly in light of the potential hardship that some folks may have been experiencing due to the COVID-19 and the loss of jobs and layoffs and all of the other things that are going on. We have not promised that we're doing that on a permanent basis. We're going to look at it quarter to quarter and decide if in fact we can do that. We are in a pretty good cash position, and I do expect to get some additional monies in the form of a loan repayment from the Mount Air Water District that I'll talk about in a minute. But one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that even when the Delco project, the infrastructure project is complete, there will be some cost to Mount Air Improvement to decommission the current wells. They need to be capped. That's one of the things that I'll have to be working on is what the proper way to dismantle that infrastructure is going to be. The pump house shed will have to go away at some point. There will be some costs involved in that. We do think that we're going to have some equipment to sell and such, but we don't want to get our cash position too low. Having said that, if we feel that we can do it, particularly as things are pretty dicey in the economy, particularly people's personal economies, we will see if we can do that again. So I don't want to make any promises right now, but that's why we wanted to talk about that. And we didn't really have a good way to get deep into the financials on this meeting call. So anybody that would like to have a little more detail on our financials, go ahead and get a hold of Andrei and he can get that information to you.
Absolutely.
Okay. The chair report, really I'm just going to go through some of the significant things that have happened since our last shareholder meeting. We did repay the emergency repair loan in July of 19. We had taken that $25,000 emergency repair loan. It was a 1-year no interest loan that had to be paid back in 4 quarters. And that was accomplished with everybody's cooperation. We appreciate that. Through that summer of 2019, we worked very hard with the Delco organization to create the project agreement that we ultimately signed in November of 2019. And part of that agreement, it's a separate piece, but it's related to the main project agreement, is an emergency repair agreement that has proved to be just a wonderful thing that we were able to get that in place, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But what that does is that it allows us to ask Delco to come and help and do brake repairs, and the cost of those repairs can be folded into the overall project and paid back over the term of the project. So that has been a very important thing that we put in place. Because we had that in place, the money that we had set aside for potential cost of emergency repairs that we might have had to bear directly and pay for immediately, that money that we had set aside for that, we were able to loan to the Mount Air Water District so that they could have some initial capital to get the water district formed, to repay some of the legal fees that had been incurred in the formation of the water district. And that loan is an interest-free loan, but it's to be repaid on 30 days notice. And in fact, just this afternoon, I was discussing that the water district is probably going to make a $5,000 payment here shortly. And we'll probably have that paid back to Mount Air Improvement by the end of second or third quarter. So we do expect that money's to be coming back. So our cash position actually is a little bit better from the standpoint of we've got that outstanding asset that's going to come back to us. The other thing that I wanted to talk about in the chair report, which is we're not going to really get into in depth at this point, and mainly I'm just kind of asking people to start to think about what this means. When the new water system is complete and the current water system is decommissioned, then we have an opportunity to do a couple of different things. And we'll have to decide probably at our final annual shareholders meeting, which I expect to happen next spring, if we're going to just simply liquidate everything and then disperse whatever assets remain back to the shareholders, which is certainly a likely thing to do. But also, it's possible that since we have the structure of Mount Air Improvement in place, even though it's really geared toward running a water system, there might be some interest on the part of residents of Mount Air, even people that are not currently on the current water system, to keep the organization going as an organization that is really dedicated toward preserving the nature of our community and the things that we like about Mount Air that we would like to see continue. So that is something that we would want to consider, because if we wanted to do that, we could leave the organization intact. We would still liquidate the assets, which would, there's some significant assets, the big tank down there, and the pumps may have some value. There's a nice generator, propane powered generator down there in the propane tank. And there's a piece of property that the house sits on. But once those things are liquidated, we might take and keep a small portion of funds to have some operating capital for Mount Air Improvement to go forward as a community organization that is really focused instead of on water, but focused on other community issues and what we can do together to preserve our Mount Air environment the way we like it. So that's really the quick and dirty chair report. I do want to get into the operator's report, so I'm going to take off my chair hat and put on my operator's hat, since I'm also the system operator. Major issues that have happened since our last shareholders meeting. We had a breakup on Plumtree Drive that Delco fixed for us. That was about $1,000 cost for that repair. We had a breakup on Mulberry in January. That was about $700 to fix that. That wasn't as involved. In relation to that break in late January, the 3-horse pump failed. It had started to cause some problems earlier. It would throw the breaker out from time to time, and it would kick in the 5-horse pump, which is the backup pump. In talking to the R.C. Berry, who is our supplier for the pumps, he said that they're really, the way that well is set up, there's not enough water covering that pump to keep it cool if it's running too long. And so that's why that pump actually failed. So we replaced that pump, and it's been running fine. You know, the new one has been running fine, but that cost us almost $3,700 to replace that pump back in February. The other significant event recently was the Olentangy River flood. Hopefully you can see the pictures there of it was just up to the doorstep of the pump house, but the groundwater came up so high. You can see in the right-hand picture that the pump house did get flooded. Very fortunately, that white tank that you see in the back kind of tipped over partway is the chlorine tank. The water did not get into that tank, which would have contaminated the system. So even though we did have to have a boil alert, and it cost us some extra money because we had 3 separate days that we had to run coliform samples into the lab to be tested, we were able to get that boil alert lifted in pretty quick fashion. And there really was no damage to the equipment. All of the electrics in the pump house are up high, so that water never got close to them. The only thing that I thought was going to get damaged was, you can't even see it because it's totally underwater. I have a dehumidifier that I normally use to keep that pump house dry so that the electrics, the contacts don't get corroded. And I was totally submerged, but I brought it home and put it next to our dehumidifier at the house for a couple of days and fired it up, and it still works just fine. The flood is past tense. I know there's some of our residents down there that are still dealing with issues from that flood. But as far as the water system, we came out of that pretty well. And it really didn't end up costing us much of anything, just a little extra money for testing. The most recent break that we just had was up on Edgecliff. Not everybody may be familiar, but there's a big pond to the south of Edgecliff Drive that's formed by a dam that has a culvert that runs underneath it, and there's a road that runs across the dam. Edgecliff runs across the dam. And that break actually happened underneath the dam, and the water was flowing out of the culvert that normally is the pond overflow, and that's part of the reason it took us so long to find this leak, even though it had gotten up to a very high volume. We were pumping up to 40,000 gallons a day when normally 10 to 12 is about a summertime usage. So we were pumping a lot of water out of there. And until that pond dropped down enough so that there wasn't very much water going out of the pond, we really couldn't identify that that's where our leak was. Well, finally, we were able to do that with the help of the Delco crew that was helping me try to get this isolated. We were able to get that fixed. It took the Delco crew, they had to dig a big hole on both ends of the dam, and they had to run 170 feet of new pipe through the old existing pipe. We were very fortunate that where that main line went from the shoulder of the road down to the middle of the road as it crossed the dam, and then back to the shoulder of the road again, that it was a nice smooth curve, so they were able to thread that pipe through. But it was a pretty major repair, and something that we really wouldn't have had a hard time dealing with without Delco's help. So I have a special thanks to Tom Pruitt, who's the Delco distribution supervisor that I've worked with on repairs. He and his crew did a terrific job helping us get that isolated, so we knew what we had to deal with, figuring out how to fix it, and then getting it done. The total cost for that repair was about a little under $2,300, which was pretty reasonable given the time and the equipment that was involved. And so the total cost for all 3 breaks that Delco has helped us on to date under that emergency agreement is about $4,000. And that will be repaid through assessment that will be applied to the current shareholders in the Mount Air system, but spread over the term of the Delco project. So it's going to be a long-term payback. So it'll be very easy to get these repairs paid for. So,
Bill, sorry to interrupt. Could you let
Yeah.
Kim in?
Pardon?
Could you let Kim into the
Oh,
meeting?
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
There are two people that were waiting, and I was talking and I didn't see that they were waiting. Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
All right. So I've let those two people in. I'll have to make sure I look over and check that screen from time to time. The other thing from a system operators report standpoint is that we did do some additional training of people that now can do the daily testing. For those of you that may not know, we do have to test the chlorine level at the pump house every single day and record what our usage has been. And Greg Bartlett for the last year and a half, 2 years has been my key backup on that. But he and I were the only ones that were trained to do that. And Larry, the previous system operator, is out in South Carolina, so he wasn't going to help. So I got put a call out. I got 4 volunteers that in March, I think we got trained how to do that testing. And along with that, I did write up some very detailed documentation of how that testing is to be done. So that if something, if I were to get COVID-19 and be out of action, then other people could have taken over and handled that. The one thing that we needed additional backup for was as the official licensed system operator, because I'm the only one that has a Class A water system license. And none of the volunteers would have been able to do those duties, such as the monthly reporting, et cetera. Delco stepped up, and Damon Dye said that he would be able to, between he and his people, they would be able to serve as the system operator if they had to. I haven't had to ask him to do that, fortunately, but we do have licensed people as backup now to be the system operator in case I can't do it or something, or I'm out of action for whatever reason. And then the only other thing that I've done for COVID-19 preparations that I'm keeping a surplus stock of chlorine on hand. I usually keep 10 to 12 cases at the pump house, and I'm keeping an extra 5 cases back in my basement, which was a good thing because we were going through chlorine at a big clip as we were dealing with that big leak on the Edgecliff Drive. So that was our COVID-19 preparations. Just a fast review of the other things that have to happen to keep your water safe and our system in compliance. I mentioned the daily chlorine testing. We also have to do a monthly coliform bacteria test. We have to do special coliform tests when we do have a leak or a repair that requires the system to be depressurized. So whenever the system gets depressurized, I have to issue a boil alert, and I have to get coliform samples from 3 different locations and take those into the lab. And then once the lab has determined that there's no coliform present, then I can lift the boil alert. And it takes about a 18 to 20 hour, I think, incubation for them to issue that all clear. So that's why sometimes the boil alerts, particularly when we had a situation over a weekend, that it took a little while to get that boil alert lifted. There are 5 tests that we're required to do in 2020, just once during the year. I've done the nitrate one. I've turned in the samples for the radiological and the inorganic compounds. And then the next month or 2, I will get the disinfectant byproducts and the volatile organic compound samples turned into Massey labs so that we can be in compliance with those EPA requirements. just real briefly, the reporting that has to be done, there's a monthly operating report that I have to turn in. There's an annual consumer confidence report that has to be done by the 1st of July. You should have all gotten that toward the end of June. We got it done a little earlier this year. I also have to keep an updated contingency plan, which essentially is the guidebook on what to do if bad things happen, like a power outage or a flood or other system disruptions. And all of the board members have a copy of that. There's a copy at the pump house. And Damon Dye at Delco also has a copy in case he has to operate as the system operator and something goes wrong. And finally, the last thing I'm going to mention about system operator is there is recurrent training required. I've got a 2-year window before I have to do recurrent training. Mine is due by the end of October. I don't think we're going to have our Delco system in place by then, so I'll have to do that recurrent training and get my license renewed by the end of November. So that's just a real fast operator's report. Now the part that's probably the most interesting to everybody is talking about the replacing our system with the Delco system and what has gone into that and what you can look to see in the next several months. The Mount Air Water District was formed a little over a year ago, February of 2019. And this was formed as a governmental agency by order of the Franklin County Common Pleas Judge. And it had to be sponsored by Sharon Township, but it is separate from Sharon Township. It's not actually part of Sharon Township. The Water District is specific to Sharon Township, and really even more specific than that, to the Mount Air areas that are part of Sharon Township. And the purpose of the Water District is at this point limited to drinking water projects. So the reason that we needed the Water District is that we needed to have an entity that had the authority to not only enter into the contract with Delco to do the infrastructure project, but also to apply for funding and also to be able to pay back that funding if it's in the form of a loan, which it is. And to be able to do that, we have to be able to assess for those costs. So that's why it was important to have a Mount Air Water District that was formed, and that happened a little over a year ago. The Mount Air Board of Trustees, or Water District Board of Trustees, are Laura Kunze, myself, Tony Palmer, Mark McPhilmy, and Ben Nepper. All but one of those are your neighbors. And there is a website for the Mount Air Water District. And you can see, I hope you can see that it says mountairwaterdistrict.org is the web address. Our next meeting will be in late July. We're hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have that date pinned down and get that posted out on the website. And it is a public meeting, so anyone is welcome to dial in, and it will likely be a virtual, at least partially virtual meeting. Although if we do have it in person as well, it would be at Sharon Township Hall over in Wilson Bridge. We will be discussing the assessment at that meeting, which we'll talk about a little bit later, because it is the Water District that actually comes up with the assessment formula and works with our legal counsel to get that in place and to be able to officially assess to repay the funding for the project. Okay, we do have a number of people from Delco on the call with us tonight. And my understanding is that these are the 4 folks that at least we're planning to dial in. I did see Glenn dial in, who's the general manager and CEO for Delco Water. Dave Wolf's the engineering supervisor. Natalie is the project manager for our project. And Chris Dye is the business operations manager. I'm going to let whoever is the best one to talk about it at Delco talk about the next, this slide and the timing and what the things look like. I've got a couple of question marks on here. So Glenn or Dave or whoever, if you want to unmute and kind of fill us in on what the timeline looks like from your end.
All right, I'll go ahead and talk unless Glenn wants to jump in there, but give you kind of an idea where we're at. CT Consultants, who is designing the system, has laid out the basic plan. I would consider it about a 70% working plan. We spent some time with them late last week, making some adjustments, and they should be getting us a more up-to-date plan that I'd like to go over with Bill and Laura at some point, just to make sure that we're covering everything. So it's moving right along. They think that set of plans is probably going to be done by mid to late August, a final set ready for bid. We're hoping to go to bid soon after that. The EPA is releasing their money, I think they said October, so that's going to work right into our timeline. It would be great to be into construction by October, November, and it is going to go past the first of the year, no doubt, as far as construction timeline. We did mail out some customer packets to everybody. If you haven't received yours, it should be coming soon. And you know, getting those returned, filled out and returned back to us is going to be super important. If you're not sure how to fill out any of the forms, if you go online to our website, it has YouTube videos for each one of them, kind of explaining how to fill it out. But you can also feel free to contact myself, Chris Dye, Natalie Linkus, there at Delco, and we would be more than happy to help you with them. And as far as notaries, the only thing that needs notarized is your easement forms. We are willing to do those by appointment. You can also come to Delco by appointment, and we can do them there. Anything we can do to help that move along. But that form is always the toughest one to get completely done because of the notarization. So, you know, that kind of gives you an idea where we're at. And, you know, if you have any questions in terms of the construction or how we're moving along, I'd be more than happy to answer those.
Yeah, I'll just chime in on the notarization. I know when the banks have their lobbies open again, then most banks do have a notary that is on duty most of the time. Sometimes you have to call ahead and just make an appointment, but I know that they do have a notary down here at the U.S. Bank too.
This is Laura Coonsey. I put out on the Mount Air Facebook page earlier today that I'm also a notary, and I'm happy to have people just, if they give me a heads up, I can meet them out on the porch and do it here in Mount Air.
Bill, this is Kim Duker. Same thing. I am also a notary, and I will put that on the Facebook page also. We'll get it taken care of one way or the other.
Okay. All right, very good. So Dave, it looks like my slide was a little optimistic as far as my timelines, but do you think that Q1 of 2021 is a reasonable completion time?
I believe so, yeah. If it goes, it'll go past the first of the year, but I don't anticipate it going too much past it. This is not a real big water system that we're building here, so I'd be shocked if we went too much. And of course, winter could throw us a curve there, but Ohio has not had the winters that it used to, so I don't anticipate weather being a problem.
Okay.
Hey, Dave, this is Glenn. Are we sure that there's no challenges with the funding that I guess we just need to get the EPA from the funding perspective to approve our timeline too? The money's not available till October. Hopefully there's no issue as long as we follow their procedures for bidding to get that out ahead of time.
That's very possible. I leave that up to the money thing. I leave up to you.
Yeah, and we have CT. They're pretty familiar with that too. But that would be the one possible delay that I guess we're not sure of at this point, Bill, and those attending is if EPA's got any. You know, we can meet those timelines just from a logistical standpoint, but there may be some requirements that are associated with the funding that would delay us.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've got this on a later slide, but just for everybody's information, we have been approved for the funding. The money is going to be there. And I think Glenn was just wanting to make sure that there aren't any stipulations in that funding that may change their timeline. Okay, just kind of circling back to that infrastructure project, these are the main elements that you, if you've gotten your packet, you've seen are things that you need to do. And maybe, I think it's fairly explained in the packet, but Dave, I don't know if you can maybe expand a little bit on some of these things and what maybe the associated costs might be for like the expansion tank or something like that.
Certainly. I'll just go right down the line on them, just kind of explain each document, just so you know. The water users agreement is a form that every Delco member signs. It basically is saying Delco will provide services under these conditions or under these terms, and you, the user, will follow the rules of Delco Water. It's just documentation for being in the club. Your backflow prevention agreement basically says that the EPA runs what's called a backflow program, and it's a program designed to protect the water, so the public water system from contaminants. And things like, if you have an in-ground sprinkling system, you have to have a backflow preventer on it. If you have a water-powered or a boiler system that's antifreeze or water-powered boiler, you have to protect the public water system from it. It's stuff like that. And that cross-connection questionnaire is just kind of asks you what you're using the water for in your house. There's a section for commercial, as the video explains. You just want to ignore that section, and I think we're dealing with all residential here, but it'll ask stuff like, do you have a dishwasher, that type of thing, and just check the ones off and sign it at the bottom. The easement, look at that document closely. It should identify all the properties that you own in Mount Air that are fronting on roads. It may even have a few of you will get easements that actually have an exhibit, because some of the water lines we laid out may cut between a few property lines, but those are pretty few. I think there's less than 5. So, in the easement, again, make sure that your name is spelled correctly. Your spouse, if you're married, it should be on there. They should be on there also. Make sure their name is spelled correctly. Even if, you own the property outright or your spouse does, Ohio recognizes dower rights. So just as a precaution, Delco always has both spouses sign. So don't let that alarm you. And then the expansion tanks installation certification is just a document saying that you're going to make sure that you install a thermal expansion tank that protects the plumbing inside your house. The expansion tank is typically about a $40 item. You can buy it at home, Lowe's, or at Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards. It simply twists into a T into your plumbing. I put mine in myself, but I'm a little handy. So, when you do your service line installation, you can have it taken care of at that time. Also, make sure that you put a shutoff valve where the Delco water line enters your house. That's something that we require, and it's always a good idea. So that just kind of gives you a rundown on those.
Dave, for the expansion tank certification, do you have to wait until it's actually installed to sign that form and get it back, or do you just sign it and get it back saying that you're going to have it before you connect?
Exactly, you can do that. I mean, if you've already got one, which some of you may already have as part of your plumbing, I don't know, I'm not familiar with Franklin County plumbing code as much. Delaware County, it's just a requirement. If you do new houses or any plumbing modifications, they typically have you put one in. So it's there to protect your plumbing. Delco's meters do not allow water to go backwards through them. There's a check valve or a double check on our meter setters. And so once water goes through, it stays. And when your hot water heats up, it's going to expand in volume, and that pressure needs to go somewhere until you use a little bit of water. And so it just kind of protects your stuff. And like I said, there's not a whole lot of complication to them. And all that form matters is saying, hey, there's a couple options on it, but you can just check the one. I'm planning on having one put in. We're not doing an inspection or anything on it, but it's saying that, I'm going to protect my plumbing.
One of the questions that one of our residents had asked is if they have a tankless water heater, you know, the water heater on demand, if they need the tank, expansion tank for that.
It's still not a bad idea, but I'm not going to say that it's definitely needed. But for $40, I'd probably put it in there. But in theory, it probably is not as necessary as it would be for somebody that has a traditional tank hot water heater.
Okay. That kind of brings us to some of the upfront costs.
No, I have a question, if I could, before we leave the easement forms.
Sure.
I had a little bit of concern with the language in the easement form, just in that it's really open-ended about 25 feet of easement and repair replacement to fences and driveways. But I'm really concerned about some of the mature trees and landscaping that we particularly have. I know we have them on Lakeshore and Walnut, and I think everyone does across the board.
Well, I can tell you this. Most of the design that we've done so far, because your streets are so narrow, most of the water lines that we are putting in are not even going to be using that easement. We're going to try to get the pits out of the meter pits, you know, which is where your service meter resides. We're going to try to get those out of the public right of way. But even most of those were not based off of CT's design. But Delco requires that every customer sign an easement. So, yeah, it's just part of the thing. If you're terribly concerned,
is there a way to figure out where generally these lines are going to be?
we know, and that's what I was just about to say is, you know, if you're concerned about how the water lines will affect your property, I can talk with CT consultants and possibly get put a rough markings out there, getting you an idea of where they're going to be in relation to your property. That's very possible.
As part of the reason that CT had Ivan, their engineer, wandering the neighborhood, is that he was really trying to not only identify things that might be problematic from an engineering standpoint that have to be dealt with, but also trying to make sure that they, as much as possible, would avoid disruption to things like mature trees and certainly septic tanks or anything else that would be a problem. I couldn't guarantee to you that there would be no disruption, but I know that is part of what he was trying to do, is to lay things out to minimize that.
Okay, yeah, it just made me a little uncomfortable signing this and sending it when it's really broad and open-ended, and we don't have any idea even what side of the property, what side of the road, what side of the property, anything it's going in on.
If you want to contact me when I'm at the office, I would be more than happy to look up your specific property. I can even send you like a screenshot of roughly where they're putting the water lines. We've actually taken the design that CT has created so far, incorporated it into our GIS, so I can kind of see the aerial photos behind it. And so you can kind of see the idea. You know, a lot of that broadness on the easement, that easement hasn't changed a terrible amount since the 1960s and early 70s when when we first started, and it's more for your advantage than it is ours. When we do a lot of rural extensions out in the country where you have a little more room than what we're dealing with in Mount Air, people have a lot of items like trees that they would prefer that Delco work around, and so it kind of gives us the ability to adjust as the property owner requests. And we'll try to do the same for you as far as this construction. My desire is that once we have a final plan set of drawings, that anybody that's concerned can take a look at the drawings and provide us some commentary back if you're concerned. It's nothing set in stone. There is going to be some areas that we may not be able to adjust based off of storms and that kind of thing. But we'll do the best we can and do the best we can to not take out trees if we can and that type of thing, because obviously doing that runs up the cost of the project, which is something we're trying to avoid anyway.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
How do we get to see the pipes will be? Do we contact you?
Yes, that'd be a good start. Contact me and I can talk with you, directly.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, what is your contact, please?
You can reach me on my desk phone at 740-201-0173. I believe that's what it is.
Hey, Dave, we could probably, if we can get a set of 30% drawings, we could probably just share a Dropbox link or something like that.
Certainly would be willing to do that, yeah.
Yeah, with Bill that he could send on to the entire group.
Dave, do you mind typing your contact info in the chat so everybody can get it there? Thank you.
Sure, I'll drop my email, definitely. Like I said, I'm trying to remember my desk phone, but I think that's what it is. So I'll try that.
Okay. The other big cost issue that people are concerned about as far as an upfront cost is the connection from the meter box to the home service. I put a note here that we'll try to get a group rate. We will probably ask the contractor that is doing the main construction, whoever wins that bid, if they are interested in bidding on these connections. But if they're not, Dave said that he's got a number of other outfits that we could try to get together with, and we'll do the best we can to negotiate a favorable rate if we can get everybody to kind of get together and have one outfit do all of it. And I think that'd be a lot simpler than everybody having to just kind of go do it on their own. But we'll communicate further on that piece. We already talked about the expansion tank. The point about the lead abatement is that if you have older plumbing and you really don't know when it was put in, or like our house, it was built in 1945, and I'm not entirely sure that all of the plumbing has been replaced in that time. It is possible that there could be some lead-based solder in some of the joints, and when the new water system is connected, that water will have a little different chemistry than the water that's coming out of the ground down here next to the Olentangy. And it is possible that if there is lead solder, that some of that lead could start to leach out if there's a change in pH or other chemistry that would cause that to happen. So it would be a good idea, if you're not certain about your plumbing, to have a plumber come and take a look at it and let you know if you have any lead solder, and if you do, it should be replaced. So that's a potential additional cost that some homeowners might be dealing with. Dave, have you got a rough, I know this is a hard question to answer, the cost of connecting to the meter box to the house. I think at one point you'd sent me an email saying that, even though it varies an awful lot depending on how far and what the circumstance is of each property, but you should be able to expect it to run, between $1,000 and $2,000 or something. Is that a reasonable number?
I would think that'd still be a reasonable number, yes.
Okay. So, it'll be dependent on the property, but at least it gives people some kind of a ballpark. Okay. The way we're paying for this project is through a loan from the Ohio EPA Drinking Water Assistance Fund. We have gotten a $1.5 million loan approved by the EPA, which is a 30-year no-interest loan, which is tremendous financing. As we mentioned before, the funds are released in October, and I believe we have to start paying it back a year after the funds are released. So that would be October of 2021. Just for everybody's information, and because this was a tremendous help to us, we did get an operating loan to Mount Air Water District from Delco. It was $50,000 initial, and they said that we could borrow more if we need to. A lot of that initial money from that loan went to repay Sharon Township, because Sharon Township had put up $25,000 up front to get the legal work done to have the water district formed, which was a huge thing for the Sharon Township trustees to do to help get this project moving. So we were able to get that loan paid back based on the Delco operating loan and get some insurance that we needed and pay some additional legal costs and put us in a fairly decent position for the Mount Air Water District to get to the point to where the project monies become available. So, and that was a real big help that Delco stepped up and provided for us. So. The way that this is going to get paid back is through a property assessment. The initial assessment model has been approved by the Water District's legal counsel. As I said, part of the reason for forming the Water District is so that they had authority to levy an assessment. We don't know the final assessment for each property yet because we need to get the final engineering estimate in order to do that. As Dave mentioned, we expect that to be happening fairly soon. And as soon as that happens, the Water District will get back together with legal counsel and really work through all of the remaining steps that are needed to actually get this assessment approved. Our current estimate of what that assessment is going to be is actually pretty decent, I think. It looks as though at least 90% of the property owners will be assessed less than $600 a year, so $50 a month, with about half of the people paying between $450 and $550 a year. So that gives a pretty decent picture of what the average homeowner can expect. Now, there are some properties that do not have houses on them. Those will still pay something, although the formula does not assess as much for an unimproved property like that. And there are some properties that are some homeowners that have a lot of property or have a lot of frontage. And so their assessment might be more than that, but it's not going to be in all but I think one case, it's not going to be a real significant amount more than that. So I think if you're kind of the average property owner with a modest property and a modest frontage, you can probably figure $500–600 a year assessment. And that assessment actually is collected with your Franklin County property taxes. It's not part of your property taxes. It's a separate assessment because the Water District has no taxing authority. All we can do is this assessment. But there will be a process that includes a formal vote by the Mount Air Water District. That when that vote's going to take place will be published on the website. Each property owner will get notified of what their assessment is to be. There will be a public hearing and there is an appeals process if a particular property owner feels that their assessment is not fair to them. That will be happening over the next several months. I don't really have a better timeline than that, but we hope to have that all put together by the end of the year so that we have plenty of time for that to be in place. And we would expect that the first property tax bill that would include that assessment would probably be the bill that is in July of 2021. There are a few properties that are within the service area of the project that are not actually part of the Water District because they're City of Columbus, they're not part of Sharon Township. Their amount that they pay is going to be calculated the same, but the Water District doesn't have authority to actually create an assessment on those City of Columbus properties. So there will have to be a different method that those properties are used to pay for the system. But it'll be calculated about the same and it'll be about the same amount per year. So that's pretty much the overview of what the property assessment is going to be. Laura, do you have anything in particular to add to that?
Yeah, a couple things. We and for people who might be considering selling their properties, within the next few years, that's something you'll want to talk to a real estate attorney about. When you sell your home, you may be obligated to pay off the balance because you are going to gain the value increase of any appreciation to your property from having access to the water. So, a home on a well is going to sell for a certain amount, but a home connected to a centralized water system like Delco should appreciate immediately in value. So we would anticipate everybody's going to get an immediate equity boost to their home. And we expect that probably will be at least the amount that you're actually going to be charged for the project. So this is a win-win for the community, and it should be a win-win for the homeowners. But just when you're considering sale price on the home and things like that, just understand you may be obligated. We should know more. We can talk to our attorney about that. You may be obligated to pay off the balance at the time you sell the house. And the City of Columbus properties would probably have a lien on their home that would obligate that, so that we're insured that we get that amount back to the district, so that it isn't something the rest of us have to bear. I'm sure we'll have a couple of public meetings beyond just the assessment meeting as we roll out the project. I know Delco, we had been, planning to do some meetings together with everybody. But with the COVID thing, it's probably going to be more virtual. So there will be more than just this meeting. Because this is just the Mount Air Improvement shareholders, we're missing some of your neighbors who are on private wells now that may have some of these same questions. So I just ask that you direct them to us to answer those, so that we get the right information to everybody quickly. But just understand we're going to have some broader, bigger meetings coming up as we get more into the details.
As I mentioned, as we were getting started, this meeting is being recorded, so we will try to get it posted if we don't have technical issues, which we should be able to get it posted on they're on the Mount Air Improvement website. So we're trying to do our best to communicate to everybody. I need to just thank a few people, and then we'll wrap up. Laura, who is the chair of the Sharon Township Board of Trustees, has been the driving force behind this project from the very beginning. It's been, 3 years, 4 years, 100 years? It's been a long time.
It's been like 6 years, actually.
About 6 years.
Yeah.
And this we would not be where we are today with this project if it hadn't been for her determination and just the drive that she has brought to this, and the foresight to see that it was needed. A special thank you again to the Sharon Township Board of Trustees, not only for sponsoring the water district, but lending us money to get it formed and supporting the project. The Mount Air Water District Board. Then former State Representative Mike Duffy was very instrumental in helping us get this move forward, as has been our State Senator Stephanie Kunze. Dr. Beth Liston, our Ohio State Representative, Kevin Boyce, Franklin County Commissioner, and our attorney for the Water District, Albers and Albers, who's brought a tremendous amount of expertise and guidance to the project. And as I've mentioned before, I'm very, very appreciative to Glenn Marsloff, and I left an N out of your name, sorry, Glenn. And the whole Delco team has just been tremendous to work with. So, whoops. So, any other questions that you want to unmute and ask, or any other discussion? I'll give you a second to find the unmute button. Okay, well, if there aren't any further questions, again, thank you, Glenn and Dave and Natalie and Kim for dialing in and getting us informed from your aspect of the project. Appreciate everybody dialing in and putting up with this somewhat unusual format for our annual shareholder meeting. I'm always available for questions. If you need anything, just give me a holler. Thank you very much. Okay, have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep.
Good night, Bill. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay.